Hello, my name is Mark Ellis from Stick and Rotor Studios, and today I want to take you through two of the new features that we have in X-KeyPad 1.5.1 Beta 25. So the first one is long press support. So what exactly is the long press? So it's an optional command or type of command that you can add to Stream Deck keys, the Stream Deck encoder dial presses on single encoders, and the tap touch on the Stream Deck Plus encoder panel. I will retrofit these back to the X-Touch Mini and possibly the PI Engineering keyboards and the virtual devices, but for right now, the long press commands are only available on the Stream Deck devices. They are triggered while the key is depressed longer than the long press time. And in your X-KeyPad settings UI, there's a place where you can adjust this long press time. I think it's currently set to 250 milliseconds. So if you if you hold the key down for 250 milliseconds, it'll automatically fire a long press command if you have one defined. If you depress the key and release it before the 250 milliseconds, then it will trigger the short press commands. And we'll actually look at an example of where we use these. They're very useful for adding additional functionality to a single key or dial press or the tap touch. It kind of almost doubles up in the functionality of that key, and I think you're going to find a lot of places where it's pretty useful. The other option that we've added is expressive commands. So exactly what are these things and when might you use them? An expressive command is useful when you need to adjust a data ref using a calculation. You're probably familiar with the numeric data ref that when you press a key, you can define a numeric data ref and then increment that up or down by a single amount. And the incrementing modes are fairly straightforward. You've got to increment up, increment down, a wrap, up-down type incrementing fashions with min and max limits. And they work pretty good for most things. Like as example, suppose you've got a multi-position switch like the transponder mode switch. And let's assume for a moment you have no commands behind that. There's no transponder up or transponder down command. There actually is, but let's assume for a moment there isn't. And you need to manipulate a writable data ref to control that function. Well, the numeric data refs handle 99% of the situation, but on occasion you're going to run into a switcher or something where the modes on it do not increment linearly. It goes like from a 0 to a 1, but then it skips 2 and goes to a 3 and then a 4, and then subsequently on the way down it goes 4, 3, skips 2, wants to go to 1, wants to go to 0. There's no way you can handle that with a numeric data ref incrementing and decrementing it. So this is where an expressive command allows you to use that. They're also because they look like a command to X-KeyPad, you can use them in short or long press modes. Right now, the numeric data refs only work with short presses. They don't really work with a long press concept where you could define multiple numeric data refs on a key or a dial press. They are very, very, very similar to a global formula. The primary difference between those is a global formula is evaluated every single flight loop. So it's constantly calculating, what you want the result data ref to be in a mode like that. And that's great for things where you're trying to represent new data in a different format and you want it to constantly be calculated. But that's useless in a situation where you want to increment or manipulate a data ref based upon an event like a key press or a dial press or something of that nature. And that's where expressive commands come in place. They're effectively a global formula. Think of them like a global formula, but they are triggered by a key event, whether that be a key press, a dial press on the Stream Deck Plus, or a tap touch on the Stream Deck Plus LCD panel. The one other thing that expressive commands have is they also have the ability to allow you to define slave data refs. So a typical use for that is, I don't know, let's say an example you want one key and you want it to operate all the lights. So maybe you're going to have something like, I want a key where I'm going to turn all my lights on, like landing lights, my taxi lights, my strobe light, or whatever. And then when I press the key again, I want all the lights to go off. And let's assume for a moment, okay, that these are lights in a special aircraft where you have no on-off commands that you could use. You basically just have to manipulate them with data refs that you would set to either 0 or 1, indicating the light being off or on. Well, here's where you could use an expressive command with slave data refs, where you have one primary data ref that you manipulate with the expression, and then all the other slave data refs will get set to exactly the same value once that event is processed and evaluated. So let's walk through these two new features and see how you might use them. So let's bring X-Plane over here and take a look. Okay, so what I've done here is I've got X-Plane up and running, and I've got the Stream Deck editor set up to look at the flight timer, which I added a couple of betas ago. And if you remember correctly with the flight timer, prior to beta 25, when you pressed the key, it would turn the timer on. If you press the key again, it would turn the timer off. And then if you press the key again, it would reset the timer. And that was all done with basically one command, okay, that basically operated the timer like that. What I've done now is added the ability to have a long press, so that the short press will turn the timer on, another short press will turn the timer off, but it will not reset it. And if you press it again with a short press, the timer will basically turn back on again, starting at the exact same time value that you had before. And now the way it works is with a long press, it'll actually reset the timer back to 0. So let's take a look at where we did that. If you look at the UI here, we're going to come over to the flight timer definition. We're going to go to commands, and you'll now notice that there is a basically enable long press command here that can be used to operate that timer in different modes. So in the short press mode, you're going to put the command in, start timer and stop timer. And then if you come over here, if you have this checkbox enabled, enable long press mode, you're going to have another, tab over here, long press tab, where you can add the command to reset the timer. And if we can actually see this in operation, if I bring the Stream Deck UI over here, so you can actually see it work. And here's the little timer here. I wish it was a little bit bigger, but it's currently running. If I press it, you'll notice that it stops the timer. If I do a short press on it again, the timer will pick back up, okay, where it was. And then if I press it for a long press, it resets the timer, but it doesn't shut it off, right? Another short press shuts it off, and then a long press will clear it. So you can see where having the ability to have short press and long presses really helps out with being able to do more with the particular key. Now let's take a look at one that I put on the Stream Deck Plus. And let's see, where did I do that? I think I did that over here. So on the radios, if you do a short tap, it's going to turn the radio audio panel on and off. Another short tap shuts it off, right? What a long press is going to do, if I do a long press on COM2, it's actually going to change COM2 to be the transmitting radio. So here's a long press. You'll notice that what it did is, this is a little bit the underlying functionality of X-Plane. As soon as I set COM2 to transmit, it automatically shut COM1 off for transmitting and shut off the audio monitor panel on it, right? So if I could do that again, if I long press again on the COM1 LCD panel, it now switches COM1 to be the transmitting radio. So short press toggles the audio panel switch. A long press actually toggles which radio is the transmitter. So it kind of gives you an idea of the kinds of things you can do with short presses and long presses, okay? Okay, let's move this out of the way, and let's take a look at expressive commands. So what I'm going to use as a sample today is we're going to actually create a command to operate the taxi lights. Now, with an expressive command. Now, in reality, this is a little bit of a fake because there's actually perfectly good commands under the covers for turning taxi lights on and off. But let's assume for a moment that this happened to be a type of a data ref where there was no commands behind it, and I actually wanted to increment it, okay, in really wild ways. I don't have to do that with the taxi light, but you'll get the general gist of how this works. So we come over here to the expressive commands, and we're going to add one. Actually, it looks like I already got one here. Okay, let's start over again. We'll start with a new one. And then you're just going to come in here and you're going to give it a name. Taxi lights. Now, you do want to name your expressive commands in a unique way because that's how they're looked up. They're looked up by this name. So if you name them all the same, frankly, what's going to end up happening is X-KeyPad is just going to grab the first one it finds in the list where it's got a match. And it is a case-sensitive match. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to define the result data ref. This is when the calculation is done, where do you want to put the results? And we're going to put the results back in the taxi light data ref. So we come in here and look at it, and here it is. Here's the taxi light data ref. And if this is writable, so if I forced it to a 0, the taxi light would go off. If I wrote a 1 to it, the taxi light goes on. So we're just going to copy this, and we're going to paste it in here. Okay? Now we need to add some variables. Let's shut this off here. Now, I'm really only working with this one data ref. So the variable I need to add is a variable for the taxi light, because in the evaluation, I'm going to look at that current state of the taxi light, and based upon whether it's a 0 or 1, I'm going to switch it to the opposite mode. So we're going to add a variable here. We're going to call it taxi for taxi lights. It's the same data ref, so I'm just going to paste that in for what I had before. Okay? Now we're going to come over here and we're going to define the expression. And the expression we want is if taxi equals 1, actually let's come over here and we'll tab this up a little bit here so it's a little easier to read. If taxi equals 1, we're going to set it to 0. Else we're going to set it to 1. So again, this syntax is very similar to what you see in Microsoft Excel. So if the taxi light variable is equal to 1, meaning the taxi light's on, comma, I'm going to set it to 0. And if it was not on, then the else condition is I'm going to set it to a 1. And we can come down here and test it. Like if I just hit this test button down here, then the test button is effectively the same as if I press the key that's associated with that expressive command. Okay? And you can see as I press the test key, it's flopping back and forth between a 0 and a 1. And that's working great. I'm going to save this just to be sure. And now we're going to come over to the key definitions. Actually, let me find it for the taxi light. Here it is right here. Go to commands. And you're going to see right now that I actually have in here, I've got the taxi light toggle command, okay? So what I'm going to really want is I'm going to want that to be an expressive command. And if I come down here to my command finder, you'll notice there's a new tab here called expressive commands. And there's the taxi light one that I had defined. And I can actually try it here. You'll notice up here this logic data ref is actually the taxi light value. That's what's making the taxi light image, go on or off, okay, based upon the different image we got. So I could try it, right? And yep, that's the one I want. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it in here. And now this is operating okay off of that. And let's just make sure that it's working here. If I bring my guy over here and I go to the Stream Deck XL, I have a taxi light here, and I'm going to press the taxi light on there. And if it's working, you'll notice it's going on and off. Okay? So again, your need for expressive commands, you're not going to find most times you're going to be able to do this with a normal command. Most times if that doesn't work, a numeric data ref will work for you. Where it's useful is when you have to increment a data ref in rather unusual ways based upon a key press or whatever, or you need to have a long press capability and you have no command available for that particular function in the aircraft because it looks like a command, you could use it in either a long press mode or a short press mode, whichever you like. So those are the two new features. And again, where I've done it, I've updated the sample so that the long presses are being used on the COM keys, and it's also being used on the timer. I did not change the taxi light in the sample. It's still using the old taxi lights command. It's not using the expressive command, but you get the gist. Expressive commands are fairly straightforward to use. I would recommend that only use them when you find that you really need them, because they do add another level of complexity to operations that you might not otherwise need. All right, great. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy X-KeyPad 1.5.1 Beta 25.